I feel like I don't need to preach a sermon after that. Thank you, Rob. That was perfect. I'm still going to. I just don't need to. That was really well done. Thank you so much. A couple days ago, Rob said at home, he said, "Are you getting sick?" I said, "No, it's allergies. It's almost April. I always get and I woke up, went, oh, no, it's a head cold." So I tested, COVID negative, I'm fine. However, I'm staying away from everyone today just because love you, but this is not appropriate to pass on. I heard a story, the cute little story of a little boy answered the phone one day. And the guy says, "Is your mommy there?" And in a hushed whisper, the little boy says, "Yes." "Well, can I talk to her?" "She's busy." "She's busy? Well, is your daddy there?" "Yes." "Can I talk to him?" "He's busy too." "He's busy too? Are there any other adults in the house?" "Yes." "Well, can I talk to them?" "Well, it's the police and it's the fire department, and they're all busy too." "They're all busy? Do you know what they're doing?" And the little boy laughs and he goes, "Yeah, they're looking for me." Hide and seek is a game we love to play as kids. When I was in my last church, it's so wonderful to see that all the kids coming to church now and getting more involved, because one of the things we had a couple years ago is we had some teenagers who've all now aged out to college age. And I'm looking forward to in a couple of years having more teens. In my last, when I was still United Methodist, in the last church in Pennsylvania, we used to have a youth group that was so big we had two. I had a youth group leader and I took the others because there was almost 30 kids. And they used to love to play the game called Sardines. You may not know Sardines. Sardines is a famous youth group game, and it's sort of like hide and seek, but it's the opposite. Okay? In Sardines, everyone seeks one person who has hidden. So one person hides, and we all seek that person. But when you find that person, they're not it. When you find that person, you hide with them where they are. So every time someone finds someone, they join them, and the group that's hiding gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And so if they're in a closet, there's 20 of them stuffed in that closet like this. And they end up looking like clowns in that little bitty car. And so thus the name Sardines. And the last person to find everyone is the loser. You want to find people first. The gospel today talks about things being lost and things being found. The problem is this: the Pharisees, who are the religious upright, they're the ones who kept all the laws and they do everything appropriately. They say, this man, this Jesus, welcomes sinners and he eats with them. Table fellowship was important because knowing someone was one thing. It's like us. I know someone, but there are people I know who I don't want to invite to my house. I'm just owning it. I know them, but I don't really want to sit and have a good evening with them because I don't really care for them. They're not okay, but they're not people I'd socialize with. He doesn't just welcome sinners, he socializes with them. He eats with them. He welcomes them at his table and makes place for them. Jesus then tells a story to the Pharisees and to all who are listening about the joy of things that are lost being found. One of them is a coin. One of them is a sheep. Today we focus on the story of the prodigal son. Rob told the story beautifully, but I think who we are, how we hear the story depends on who we assume we are in the story. How we hear the story of the prodigal depends a lot on who we think we are in the story itself. And I think we can be different people in the story at different times in our lives. And I want to just explore that with us for a few moments. We assume we're the son. I love how in Bible stories, I always assume I'm the one who receives grace and mercy. Maybe you do that too. We're always the ones who are welcomed back. Maybe we are. Maybe we are the ones who have gone our own way. Excuse me. Maybe we've lost our way. Maybe we are the ones who've squandered, who've lived in ways that didn't reflect how we were raised. Maybe we're the ones who came back and asked for forgiveness and found grace and mercy. At some points, I think that has, in some ways, been many of us. I know it's been me. But then I wonder if sometimes we're not also the other brother. The older brother, the one who's threatened and disgruntled. How dare you? How dare you? I've been the one taking care of mom and dad all these years, and you waltz in here and they just love you to death. You're just everything. And I'm the one who gets all the mess of the aging parents. How dare you? How dare you? I deal with these kids all day long, and you come home from work and they're just happy to see you, and now you tell me what I need to do better? How dare you? Sometimes we're the older brother, and we think that we have a right to grudge others being welcomed because we're somehow more faithful than they. I grew up in that kind of a church. It was a lovely place, don't get me wrong, lovely people who loved me to death, but I can tell you right now, after church on Sunday, I heard the comments, can you believe what she was wearing? I would never go to church looking like that. Sometimes we are the people who think that our specialness, that our privilege makes us somehow more holy and more acceptable and more righteous than others around us. But then I wonder too if at some point we're also not called to be the Father. Now the Father in the parable is of course God, but we are called to reflect God and to be God's presence in the world around us. Watching and waiting, celebrating with abandon. I couldn't help but watch the video this morning and get a little misty-eyed. I grew up with my father not being in my life for many years. My parents divorced. They separated when I was 5. There were many years. My dad was an alcoholic, and so when he left, there were many years there wasn't a lot of contact, none actually, for many, many years. One day when I was 12, I got a call, my mother got a call from one of my aunts. She was up from North Carolina to New York, and my father had come from New Orleans to my grandparents in North Carolina and wanted to know if I could come back and he could spend time with me. My mother said absolutely not. Eventually she gave in, and I was allowed to go. So my aunt, who had been up for a wedding, drove me back to North Carolina 9 or 10 hours from New York. I remember it was the first time I'd seen my father in 7 years. I was 12 years old. I remember pulling into the driveway like it was yesterday of my grandparents' house, and he was standing right inside the door waiting for the car. I can still hear, as clear as a bell, the sound that only a southern wooden screen door makes when it slams. He ran down those stairs and picked me up and cried. For the first time in 7 years, we were together again. I remember that night, we were in the bedroom, and I was in the bed, and he was sitting on the bed, and we were just talking. And it had been 7 years since we'd had any conversation at all. No phone calls, no letters, nothing. There's a lot of catching up to do. We talked, and we talked, and we talked, and before I knew it, the sun was coming up, and we had talked all night long, literally, and we could have talked for hours more. Sometimes we're called to be the Father. Sometimes we're called to wait by the screen door and to run with such abandon that it slams behind us because we can't wait to welcome someone into our home and our lives. Then I began to wonder, did the father ever do this to the grandfather? I mean, it's a parable, so I can extend a little bit of it, perhaps. Did the father in the prodigal son story know what it was like to run away and do his own thing and turn his back on his family? Maybe he did. Maybe that's why the father understood that the son will get back. Just give him time. I'm just going to keep watching. What I love about the story is not that the door was knocked and the father came to the door and said, "What do you want?" While he was yet far off, the father saw him and ran to him. While he was yet far off means the father had to be watching. He had to be waiting. It wasn't a coincidence that he saw his son. It was intentional. I wonder if the father was ready because he had once been that kind of son and he knew what kind of grace and mercy he'd been extended as well. What about us? Have we learned lessons of acceptance and forgiveness and second chances that have taught us what it means to extend mercy in ways that maybe other people weren't willing, or maybe in the past we hadn't been willing? Have we extended grace and mercy and welcome because we too have been forgiven and welcomed when we were least deserving? Tony Campolo, who I've talked about before with you, is an evangelical pastor, and he wrote a book called The Kingdom of God is a Party. And he tells one of his favorite stories, and I want to share that with you now. On one of his trips to the east, from the East Coast to Hawaii, Tony tells the story of a time when he found himself awake because of the time difference, middle of the night. Not wanting to wake up his wife, he decided to go for a walk, and he found a diner. He decided to go in and get himself something to eat. He walked in, and everything he touched, he said, was greasy and just felt sticky. The guy behind the counter came over and said, "What do you want?" And so he ordered a donut and a coffee. And as he sat there eating his donut and drinking his coffee, it was 3:30 in the morning, and the door of the diner swung open, and in walk 9 or 10 prostitutes. Much to his dismay and, frankly, his discomfort, it was a small diner, and so they sat on both sides of him. Their talk was loud and it was crude, and of course, Tony kind of just wanted to leave, felt completely out of place. But before he could make his getaway, he heard one of them say, "Hey, tomorrow's my birthday. I'll be 39. One of the other women said, "So what? What do you want me to do? Throw you a birthday party? Shut up already." She said, "Jeez, it's just my birthday. You don't have to be mean about it. Why would you throw me a party? No one's ever thrown me a birthday party. Don't be stupid." As soon as he heard that, Tony made his decision. He waited until the women had left. He said to the guy behind the counter, "Hey, do you know them? Are they there regularly?" The guy said, "Yeah, every night like clockwork. We get our regulars all night long." He said, "Hey, I overheard the one named Agnes say that tomorrow is her birthday. What do you think about us throwing a party for her here? She said she's never had one before." The guy said, "She's really very nice. I think it's a great idea. Let's do it." Tony said, "Good. I'll bring the cake." So the next morning at 2:30, he gets up and he shows back up at the diner. The guy behind the counter, the owner and his wife, they decorated with some balloons, and they made a sign that said, "Happy birthday, Agnes." And evidently word got out because some folk had shown up who were there every night anyway. Promptly at 3:30, the door opened, and in walked Agnes as everyone yelled, "Happy birthday." And she was shocked. Her mouth fell open, her legs seemed to buckle a bit. One of her friends grabbed her arm to steady her as she walked over to the counter. They sang "Happy Birthday," and her eyes visibly moistened. Then they brought out a cake with 39 lit candles, and Agnes sobbed like a child because no one had ever done that for her in her life. When the party finally came to a close, Agnes walked out the door, and there was a stunned silence. And so, not knowing what to do, Tony broke the silence by saying, "I'm a pastor. Would it be okay if we had a word of prayer for Agnes?" And so right there in the middle of the diner, he prayed that God would be a part of Agnes's life and that she would find wholeness and happiness and that she would be blessed this birthday like never before. The guy behind the counter who owned the diner said, "Hey, you never told me you're a pastor. What kind of church do you pastor?" in one of those very rare moments when Tony says, very rare moments when you get just the right words, he said, I guess I pastor the kind of church where you throw a birthday party for a prostitute at 3:30 in the morning. The guy waited a moment and he kind of sneered and he said, that's not a church. Trust me, if there was a church like that, I'd belong, because that's what the church should be. That is what every church should be like, because that's what God's love is like. It's what we're called to be like. It's when we're called to look at the outer person and see a child of God, to look beyond who they are and to see that they're loved by God just as we are, and called to offer them spontaneous, authentic, unconditional welcome. Love without strings attached. The scriptures tell us today there are millions of finders out there, but there's only one keeper, and that keeper is God. We're the finders, and it's our job, it is our calling, the scriptures say, to find the lost and then to be a part of the party and the celebration when they come home. Amen.